Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is the second video on the chapter 12, disease and immunity chapter 5090 O-level syllabus. Now coming to the effects of excessive consumption of alcohol, this is point number 12.1.15 is your syllabus point, and it says what does it result in? It results in reduced self-control. Reduced self-control means that usually you control yourself, don't go into arguments with people, you don't fight with people. But under the effect of alcohol, you are going to be unable to do that, and you're going to lose control, maybe enter up into fights, maybe hit somebody, maybe get angry with somebody, maybe abuse somebody, and that is reduced self-control. Then the fact that alcohol is a depressant doesn't mean that it makes you depressed, means it depresses the central nervous system, which means that you're unable to think correctly, and you maybe make decisions which are not very correct, and you make rash decisions. So it's a depressant of the central nervous system, so your thought process is affected. Then your reaction time is increased. What does that mean? It means that if you are driving a car and you see somebody crossing the road and you want to apply the brakes, but you will it'll take you a little longer. Say normally it takes 10 seconds, now it'll take 20 seconds. And by that time you will have hit the person. So reaction time is increased, meaning that you will take more time to react to a situation. Then of course, because the alcohol is going to enter your bloodstream and then it's going to be taken to the liver through the hepatic portal vein. So what is going to happen is that it is going to be detoxified in the liver, and during that process, it is going to damage the liver cells. So the person is going to ultimately suffer from liver failure, which is called cirrhosis of the liver. Then social implications, because this person is under the effect of alcohol, is unable to get up in time, go to work, look after his personal hygiene, so he's going to lose his job. And because he's unable to then support his family, so maybe end up in a divorce, then in order to get money for the alcohol, he's going to indulge in criminal activities, and he may start drug abuse of some other nature, and of course become more and more disabled person in the society. The next topic is effects of tobacco smoke. Now, the effects of tobacco smoke is basically we've got to discuss people who smoke, inhale. Tobacco is a plant, and actually, what you have in the cigarettes is the leaf of the tobacco, which is crushed, and you smoke that. And it contains major toxic components are number 1, nicotine, number 2, tar, and number 3, carbon monoxide. Now, nicotine is addictive. It makes you feel good phenomena, but it results in vasoconstriction of the blood vessels. While tar causes a mutation in the DNA of the cells, which are lining the trachea and the bronchi and the bronchioles, and this results in lung cancer. What is lung cancer? Lung cancer is uncontrolled cell division, and it results in a lump. And this lump, of course, is not normal. There's no lung tissue in it. It's just a lump of cells because it is uncontrolled cell division. So this lump of cells is cancer, but then some of these cells can break off and go and enter some other organ. Maybe it goes to the stomach and starts to grow in the wall of the stomach. So that is why the cancer is going to spread. So nicotine, tar, and the third one is carbon monoxide. Now carbon monoxide combines with hemoglobin. It's not carbon dioxide, combines with hemoglobin and forms carboxyhemoglobin. So the red blood cell which has carboxyhemoglobin in it cannot transport oxygen. Why? Because carboxyhemoglobin is a stable compound. So this red blood cell is not going to transport oxygen. But the normal hemoglobin can transport oxygen. So the person who smokes has lesser number of red blood cells, so has less oxygen carrying capacity. So less oxygen reaching the body cells, which means less oxygen for aerobic respiration. That means he is not going to be able to have the stamina, so he is going to have difficulty in running a 100-meter sprint or in doing any physical exercise. Now, the diseases that we need to study is related to smoking is number 1, bronchitis, number 2, emphysema, number 3, lung cancer, and heart disease. How smoking results in all these 4 diseases, and it contributes to these 4 diseases. Now, the disease bronchitis, what happens in that? Smoking irritates the air passages, more mucus is produced by the goblet cells, cilia become paralyzed, Mucus collects in the bronchioles. So mucus is food for bacteria and repeated bacterial infections in the lungs. So that is bronchitis. Itis is a word which we use for a lot of diseases, like if somebody has sore throat, then it's tonsillitis. If he's unable to speak, then that's laryngitis. So infection of the larynx. So itis is a word which we use very often, even in trachea, tracheitis, or in the stomach, gastritis. So bronchitis is a disease which actually is people who are smokers are more prone to it because they are the ones who are inhaling the smoke. And the smoke, of course, is an irritant. Now let's discuss the other disease which is called emphysema. Now in emphysema, what happens is people who have been smoking for very long actually results in the weakening of the alveoli. So they're weakened alveoli. Now when these people cough or they sneeze or they have violent coughing bouts, then the alveoli burst. Now there will be less surface area for gas exchange. And this, of course, makes their life very miserable because they are breathless. They get breathless very easily, just walking up a flight of stairs, just walking from their bed to the bathroom makes them breathless. And ultimately, we have to put them on oxygen cylinders because they just can't, live a very normal life. So what is going to happen is normally we have all these alveoli. You can see I've drawn all these alveoli and there are six of them. But over a period of time, when the alveoli burst, what is going to happen? All this area is gone. Now, there is, what did I say? I said less surface area for gas exchange. So there's now less surface area for gas exchange. And this, of course, is going to result in breathlessness. These people will not be able to carry on a normal life and they will need oxygen cylinders or they'll have to be on oxygen. Now coming to the next disease is lung cancer. Now, as you know, smoking, when you inhale the smoke, it contains lots and lots of irritants, and we're discussing only a few. So one of them is tar, and when tar was taken out and rubbed on the skin of mice, they actually developed skin cancer. And tar is a mutant. It's a mutagen. It causes a mutation. Mutation is what? It's change in the DNA of the cells. And this, of course, results in uncontrolled cell division because there are parts of DNA which control cell division. When that is damaged, when there's a change, it's going to result in uncontrolled cell division and you result in an abnormal mass of cells. So in the lungs of a person, there's going to be an abnormal mass of cells. So these are the two lungs of a person. You have the right lung and the left lung, and the trachea divides right bronchus and the left bronchus. So you're going to find abnormal mass of cells. But then these cells are immortal. Immortal means they never die. That is what you have to understand. So these cells break off and they might go and invade the stomach or the spine or the brain of the person and they'll start to grow there in the wall of the stomach. So they will go to other organs and they'll multiply there, and this is called metastasis. And we say that the primary tumor was in the lungs and now the metastases are found in the stomach. Now that's not a very nice thing because then this is the stages of cancer keeps on increasing. This would be the third stage of cancer, and then that means we can't do much because we have as yet not developed any treatment for this. Now coming to the next disease, which is heart disease. How does smoking contribute to heart disease? So there is vasoconstriction of the blood vessels because of the nicotine and other chemicals in cigarette smoke. And platelets become sticky and the fat is deposited in the wall of the arteries. When this happens in the coronary arteries, which supply the muscle of the heart, you see the heart wall is made up of a muscle which is called myocardium. Now that needs a blood supply as well because the cells are living. So the coronary arteries, when they get blocked, that means a portion of the heart muscle is not going to receive enough oxygen. So the coronary arteries are on the surface of the heart, and when a certain coronary artery gets blocked, that means this part of the heart is not going to receive any oxygen, glucose and oxygen, so it's not going to respire. That part of the heart, even though it might be a very small part, a microscopic part, but that part dies. So the heart muscle is damaged, and then the person has a heart attack. So basically, we're talking of smoking resulting in a heart attack because it is blocking the coronary arteries. And if it's a partial blockage or it's a complete blockage, and of course, then we of course do all the different maneuvers. We have to do bypass surgery or we have to put a stent. So all those things are just, of course, something which we do after to repair the damage done. But of course, if people don't smoke, then of course we would have less of these problems. Now we come to the problem of women who smoke during pregnancy. Now, of course, this results in the reduced birth weight of the baby. Often, when you have your mother and your grandmother sitting and they talk about the day you were born, they talk about your weight. What was your weight? 7 pounds, 6 pounds, 9 pounds. What was your weight when you were born? I mean, that's a very important topic of discussion. And the women who smoke, their babies. So we took maybe 1,000 women who smoked and 1,000 women who didn't smoke, and then we did a study on them, and we recorded the birth weight of the babies that were born to these mothers, the one who smoked and the ones who didn't smoke, and we realized that the women who were smokers had reduced birth weight of their babies. Now the reason is because there's too much of carboxyhemoglobin. There's too much of carboxyhemoglobin, so that means less oxygen in the mother's blood. So less oxygen reaching the fetal cells. So when less oxygen reaches the fetal cells means less aerobic respiration. Less aerobic respiration means less energy released. So less aerobic respiration, less energy released. So less energy released means less growth. Now when these children are born, these babies are born, they are of course smaller in birth weight. Birth weight is the weight which we record when you were born. So that is called the birth weight. So less oxygen, less respiration, less energy, less growth. Now coming to topic 12.2, antibiotics. Now we've all had antibiotics, and augmentin, ciproxin, azomax, and vibromycin. These are all antibiotics. We must have had them at some point in time in our lives. Now 12.2 says describe a drug as any substance taken into the body that modifies or affects chemical reactions in the body. So drugs can be anything. Even Panadol is a drug. Even Castin is a drug. It's an anti-allergic. Panadol is a painkiller. Brufen is a drug. So any substance, it says any substance, didn't say painkillers, didn't say antibiotics, any substance. So that is taken into the body that modifies or affects chemical reactions. You've got a headache, so you take Panadol. Or you have a headache and you take Ponstan. Now these are all painkillers. Now what do? They dull the reaction, they dull the nervous system so that you don't feel the pain. You still have the problem, but you don't feel the pain. Like somebody's fractured their leg, so we give them very, very strong painkillers because a bone which is fractured results in a lot of pain. Then the second point is describe the use of antibiotics for the treatment of only bacterial infections. So I'm sorry, we will not take it in COVID-19. If you're suffering from corona, well, you're not going to take because it's a viral infection. If you have a flu, it's a viral infection, so you're not going to take an antibiotic. Then it says state that antibiotics kill bacteria but does not affect viruses. Why? We're going to discuss that. Then explain how development of antibiotic resistant bacteria, including the MRSA, can be minimized by using antibiotics only when essential. But of course, that is of course a big problem because we do not do that. We take antibiotics when we have any little problem. We say, oh, let's start augmentin or let's start ciproxin. So when we have to define a drug, we say it's a substance taken into the body. We can take it in the form of a tablet, so you can take it orally, or we can inject it. That's called an intramuscular injection, or we can give you an IV, we give it to you into a vein, like you give a drip, and which we inject something directly into the blood. Or you can take it in the form of an inhaler, like people who are asthmatics take Ventolin inhalers. Or you can apply it as a cream on your skin and it's absorbed through the skin. You can take it as a nasal drop, you can take it as eye drops. So substance taken into the body modifies or affects the chemical reactions in the body. Now I'll give you a simple example. Now insulin is produced by your pancreas, but it's not a drug. But when we have people who are diabetics, they inject themselves with insulin, then it becomes a drug because it's taken into the body. But the normal insulin which is produced in you and me or anybody else, whenever we eat something which has carbohydrates and your blood glucose level rises, that insulin is produced by the body. That's not a drug. But if you take something in the form of a medicine, so taken into the body, that means you are taking it as a medicine that modifies or affects chemical reactions in the body. In order to understand the use of antibiotics and the fact that we only use antibiotics for bacterial infections. So, in only bacterial infections, we use antibiotics. So, all those people who took antibiotics when they had corona were actually waste of time and waste of money because it does not kill the virus. That's why the corona spread so much, is because it was a viral disease. Now, the bacteria has a capsule, a cell wall, a plasma membrane, it has cytoplasm, it has ribosomes, it has plasmids. While the virus has nothing, virus is actually not even living. And it has only a lipid envelope and a capsid, but it has no cytoplasm, it has no cell membrane, it has no cell wall, it has a protein coat, and sometimes there's a lipid layer outside it, and inside there's only a DNA or an RNA. So, if you look at the differences between viruses and bacteria, these are the differences. Viruses are between living and non-living. Bacteria are living. They lack the cellular machinery. They contain cellular machinery. Reproduction, it requires a host cell. Virus cannot reproduce on its own, while bacteria can reproduce on its own. And benefits for human limited, and of course large number of benefits of bacteria. Now I want you to understand, how do antibiotics work? Now this is a very good example of it. They inhibit protein synthesis. That means the bacteria cannot make its own proteins. You know, bacteria needs its own enzymes. Now, if the bacteria cannot make its own enzymes, then it is going to die. It inhibits nucleic acid synthesis. You know, the DNA in the bacteria, it has to be copied. So DNA has to be synthesized, it has to be copied. That's how bacteria divide by binary fission. Now, if there is going to be no DNA synthesis, then the bacteria is unable to divide. Then inhibition of cell wall synthesis. The cell wall cannot be made. You know, one bacteria divides into two bacteria by binary fission. So the cell wall needs to be synthesized for the new bacteria. Now, if that is not going to be done, the bacteria is not going to reproduce. Then the cell membrane, which is partially permeable, so disruption of the cell membrane function. If the cell membrane becomes fully permeable, then everything will enter, water, ions, and the cell is going to burst. Or it inhibits the metabolism, like it is unable to respire. If it doesn't respire, it doesn't release energy, well, it's going to die. But then you've got to remember is that viruses do not have any of these things. They have no cytoplasm. They do not have any protein synthesis. They do not have any DNA synthesis. They, in fact, reproduce inside another host cell. Viruses cannot reproduce on their own. They have to reproduce inside another host cell. So that is why antibiotics will not work on viruses, because viruses do not have all these problems. They do not do protein synthesis. They do not do nucleic acid synthesis. There's no cell wall in viruses. There's no cell membrane in viruses, and there's no metabolism in viruses. So if none of these is going to happen, so then how can antibiotics kill viruses? Antibiotics cannot kill viruses. Now coming to the topic of antibiotic resistance. Now your syllabus says how development of antibiotic resistant bacteria including MRSA can be minimized by using antibiotics only when essential. So how do antibiotic resistant bacteria develop? This is what you have to understand is O levels. Of course in A levels we'll do it to a much higher level and a much it's much more comprehensive when we study it in A levels. There is a population of dividing bacteria. During the bacteria DNA. During division, one of the bacterium undergoes a mutation in its DNA that results in antibiotic resistance. When an antibiotic is added, all the sensitive bacteria are killed. But there's one this resistant bacteria survives. And this is not killed by that antibiotic. But it has developed because of a mutation in the DNA. Please understand this. So the antibiotic resistant bacteria, however, is unaffected by the antibiotic. Now, the resistant bacteria flourishes because now it's going to divide into 2, 2 into 4, 4 into 8, 8 into 16, and so on and so forth. Like imagine there's one bacteria, and in a couple of hours, there'll be maybe a million bacteria of that resistant one. So the resistant bacteria can continue to divide, forming a population of antibiotic resistant bacteria, right? Now, another way of explaining this is antibiotics help our bodies to kill the type of bacteria that make us sick. Some of the bacteria that make us sick get better at defending themselves against antibiotics, meaning resistant bacteria are harder to kill. This is called antibiotic resistance. The resisting bacteria start to multiply, making our antibiotics less and less effective. So now we have to develop new antibiotics because the previous one, which we had maybe 30 years ago or 40 years ago, they are not going to work. So we have a lot of problems because we cannot develop new antibiotics just like that. It's not an easy thing. So antibiotic resistant bacteria is now developed. Now, what are the causes of antibiotic resistance? Number one, overprescribing antibiotics. Everybody's given antibiotics. You have a pain in your throat, okay, take antibiotics. No, that's a very, and especially in Pakistan, because anybody can go and buy antibiotics. In other countries, you can't. In UK, in the USA, you can't buy antibiotics. You have to have a doctor's prescription, which is not easy to get. So you cannot buy antibiotics off the counter. Now, if you go in Pakistan to any shop and say, okay, you want Azomax or you want Vibramycin or you want Augmentin, well, they'll give it to you. You don't need even a prescription. So, and then patients will not take antibiotics as prescribed. They will take it, say the doctor says take it for 5 days. And he feels better after 2 days, so he's going to stop the antibiotics. Then unnecessary antibiotics used in agriculture to control diseases like, in chicken farming, poultry farming, and in animal farming like dairy farms. Poor infection control in hospitals and clinics, poor hygiene and sanitation practices, lack of rapid laboratory tests to really prove that the person has a bacterial infection. So then we give them antibiotics. But no, we will just give them antibiotics randomly. Okay, you have a sore throat, take an antibiotic. You have a toothache, take an antibiotic. You've got a headache, take an antibiotic. Well, that's all very bad because it's going to result in a lot of antibiotic resistant strains of bacteria developing, right? How can we stop it? Improve labs. Country need medical labs to identify bacteria and choose the right drugs to treat them. Collect and share data. Countries need systems to track cases and report results globally to make better policy decisions. Use antibiotics wisely. To ensure antibiotics are here when we need them, they must be prescribed and taken correctly. Take measures to prevent infections, especially in healthcare settings. Good infection control practices are critical to stopping the spread of resistant genes. 8 ways to be antibiotics aware. Number one, antibiotics save lives, but they aren't always the answer when you're sick. Antibiotics do not work on viruses. Antibiotics are only needed for treating certain infections caused by bacteria. An antibiotic will not make you feel better if you have a viral infection. Anytime antibiotics are used, they can cause side effects. Taking antibiotics creates resistant bacteria. If you need antibiotics, take them exactly as prescribed. Stay healthy, clean hands, cover coughs, and get vaccinated for the flu, for example. So, this is how we're going to prevent antibiotic resistant strains from developing. Now, for the O levels, this is especially mentioned in the syllabus MRSA. MRSA, I mean, we just said MRSA, but it's actually MRSA. It's a methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus, and it's a bacteria. So it is a bacteria. So what is the problem about it? It is responsible for difficult to treat infections in humans. MRSA is by definition a strain of Staphylococcus aureus that is resistant to a large group of antibiotics called the beta-lactams, which include the penicillins and the cephalosporins. So these are actually very highly resistant bacteria which are found in hospitals, on the clothing of doctors and nurses, and these are transferred to people who go there as patients. And these are very difficult to treat because the normal antibiotics which we have, which we normally take, are not going to work on them. So they will have to be given another very lethal type of antibiotic, which may or may not kill them. So the MRSA infection, of course, results in this patch infection of the skin, and it really proliferates and can spread, and the blood infection can really become very, very dangerous, and it's very difficult to treat. So this is the MRSA infection, which we want to avoid because we should not be giving antibiotics like that, and we should try to avoid in promoting the use of antibiotics without any disease which is bacterial. This completes the 12.2 of chapter 12, and thank you very much for watching, and please do subscribe And do leave comments if these videos are helpful, and what else would you like me to add to these videos if there are any problems that you're facing. Thank you very much.